if you keep plecos, corydoras, loaches, or any other bottom-feeding fish, then the food I'm about to talk about is for you. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today we're going to talk about one of the many foods that is put out by Xtreme Foods, and that's their bottom wafers. So, you guys know that I've done the Xtreme Krill Flake, also known as the Marine Flake, as well as the Nano Pellets, and I love that stuff, especially that Krill Flake. Well, after doing a video, some of you reached out, ended up pointing Xtreme in my way, letting them see my review of their food, and they offered to send me a ton of stuff to try. No sponsorship, nothing like that. However, the product that I'm going to talk about, this particular bottom wafer, was provided by Xtreme. However, Xtreme's not going to get to see this before you guys. So the same day that this goes live, it goes live to you. I'm not being paid, nothing like that. They simply provided me a bunch of food and said, hey, we'd love to hear your feedback on all this stuff, good and bad. Please don't hold back. I like a company that has that kind of guts. So, as you guys know, I have Wabben plecos, I have some corydoras, I have Danger Noodle, the Dojo Loach. So I've got a few bottom feeders that all are going to be snacking on this stuff, and have been. You can actually see from this container, and I had another container that I've gotten quite a bit down, and my other container was the slightly smaller version of this. That's completely empty at this point. I've also been giving this to my green dragon longfin plecos. There's only 2 of them. They're kind of small, but I've tried on a couple plecos and a bunch of corydoras. I want to give you my feedback and what I think about this product, the good, the bad, and kind of compare it a little bit to a few other foods, mostly because of my experience with plecos. So with that being said, let's dive in. First off, why does this food matter? So number one, it's a sinking wafer. That's great. Makes it easy to get to our bottom feeding fish, prevents our top feeding fish from really getting at it. Some of the benefits that I would say about this food as far as the pros. Let's go with the pros section. This is all the good stuff. It doesn't dissolve very fast, so you can leave it literally in the bottom of a tank for your Shire fish for over 24 hours, and it still stays relatively intact. Now, after 24 hours or so, it is going to dissolve some. Even after I think about 12 hours or so, you're going to get some breakdown. However, for the most part, it remains sunk for a full day. And then afterward, it gets a little more buoyant. It will kind of float around if your fish haven't gotten to it. I've seen this a few times with some of my plecos, but in general, if this gets thrown in at night, it's gone the next morning, unless I put a lot in there. The second pro, this is not purely an algae wafer. Now, the first ingredient is pea protein, so we're starting with vegetables. That's great. However, there is some other more common protein sources, if you will, like your fish meals and stuff. And specifically, let's go over the ingredient list just to get an idea of, by weight and percentage, how much of this stuff is in there first, because that's how they list it in order. So number 1, pea protein. Number 2, fish meal. Number 3, shrimp meal. Number 4, grain distillers. So that's where we start getting our first filler, but you are going to have some filler no matter what. A little bit of dried yeast and rice flour, then dried kelp, some algae meal, and then we get into all like the really tiny stuff that doesn't matter. But in general, what we're looking at is pea protein is our primary here, followed by shrimp and fish meal. So we're getting some animal-based protein, but primarily starting with our veg protein, and that's really good. What this means is that this food can be kind of omnivorous. Carnivores can eat it. Our vegetarians can eat it. Most plecos will eat anything, let's be honest. But more importantly, this isn't a food like an algae wafer that you're going to give exclusively to your algae-eating plecos. You can give this to the more carnivorous eaters if they'll touch prepared foods. Some don't. I've had that experience. However, some will, and that's where something like this really can shine, in that you can give it to both. I have noticed in general, just from my own observations, that the tanks that get a regular amount of this in their diet mixed in with vegetables grow faster. So I've had some young juvenile Wabben plecos in one tank. versus another. The same number of fish for each time. Both, they were all roughly the same size when they went into those tanks. The ones that get this stuff grow a little bit faster. They're a little bigger. They've got a little bit wider bodies. And it could just be those are all males that haven't shown yet. Maybe they grow faster, or they're females, whichever it may be. You guys know I'm not like the uber guru of plecos. However, I have noticed by pure observation that the plecos that get more of this food have grown a bit faster than the ones that see more green beans and zucchini. So that extra fish meal protein is probably what's really helping boost that extra growth and just get them a little fatter and a little bit more ready to become adult plecos. This is not a pure pleco food. I've had this with my Corydoras. They go hog wild for this thing in the 75 long. I've got 3 different species of Cory in there, and they all, when I throw this stuff in there, they all go right to it. They're just going nuts for it, eating it like crazy. It has been great as a bottom feeder food, as the name implies, a sinking bottom wafer. What are the downsides? Are there downsides? The extreme foods are a little more expensive than some of the other foods that are out there, like say your Tetra type products, some of your more budget-friendly stuff. However, it has been my experience that the ingredients going into these products is better than what is typically found in a lot of those things. So you're just getting a little bit better quality food for a little bit more. But what I do like is that these last a long time, unless you have a lot of plecos and go through a ton of food, because plecos eat and eat and eat and eat. This tin has gone a long way, and I know there's going to be somebody in the comments razzing me for calling a plastic jar a tin, but that's just how I live, all right? The smaller, actually don't have the smaller size right by me. I was looking for it over in my little shelf over here. But the slightly smaller version of this, it lasted quite a while too. I think between 4 tanks containing pleco, so 2 tanks with 4 about 2.5 inch to 3 inch juvenile plecos, 1 tank with about 20 or so babies, and then my adult tank, that container lasted about 2 months, month and a half. And then now I've been moving on to this container, and you can see I'm down close to halfway on this thing. So we're going through a good amount in the time that I've had this product in my house. And in general, I can really only say that the one downside is it's a little more expensive for those who are on a budget compared to some of the other potential wafer products out there. However, I would say the quality is worth the slight extra cost, just in my experience. And let me give you a prime example. So I want to be clear, I'm not trying to bash on this particular product because I think it's perfectly good too, but Fluval's Bug Bites has an algae crisp, and this is a completely empty tin. I've used it all. I was more likely to see leftovers of this food when I tested it when compared to the Xtreme. So side-by-side comparison, doing alternating days basically of feeding. If I put 4 tabs of this into my tank of 20 baby plecos, and I put 4 tabs of the sinking wafer, because they're roughly similar size and weight, the next day the sinking wafers were gone, and almost always I would see reasonable amounts of this left over, the algae wafer. Now, part of that might be because there is the extra protein in that when you compare these 2 foods. Just a quick look at the label. I have to remember, because, they talk about black soldier fly larvae on this because it's a part of the bug bites, but I can't remember how much is actually in this one. Of course, the teeny tiny tin doesn't have the label. So, editing Bentley will have to put up a little note here. Thanks, editing Bentley. And give you kind of the heads up as to what. But just in general, I've noticed that the more pure algae wafer doesn't get eaten quite as quickly by my plecos as the Xtreme sinking wafer. So I think that's a reasonable thing to look at, is just the fish, same tank, same number of rough weight or amount of food, if you will, by number of tabs. One goes away faster. You can take that, it's pure, there's nothing scientific to this. It's just an observation of when I fed these 2 foods. And, I have this container here, and I had another container of a different type of algae wafer, the Hikari stuff. They just do not eat these as fast as they eat the Xtreme stuff. And maybe it's because of the extra protein that's in there for the fish and the shrimp. Maybe it's like some of the other additives that enhance appetite. I'm not sure, because there's like a little bit of paprika in the Xtreme stuff. I'm not exactly sure what is the thing that makes the Plecos go, I want that stuff, and I guess I kind of like that stuff. But they like the Xtreme stuff, and they eat it pretty dang quick. So for me, so far, every Xtreme product I have tried for a long period of time has done well. However, there's one other downside I want to talk about. If you have extremely shy eaters and you put this food in and they don't eat it the first day, when it does break down, it gets kind of floaty. In some of the algae tabs, I have noticed that they tend to stay sunk the entire time once they do finally sink. They take longer to sink, but when they do sink, they stay down at the bottom and they really don't start to float after, say, 24 hours, where in the case of the Xtreme, they do. Now, I've only seen one or two of these when I threw a few too many in a tank on accident. I meant to, like, I had a handful and I was like, I'm going to throw a few in this tank and a few in that tank and a few in that tank. And like, my hand slips a little or whatever, and I throw too many in one tank and I'm like, well, they'll get to it and it'll be fine, or I'll just vacuum it out in another day or so. And usually it gets eaten, but some of it will kind of float around in the flow of the tank. So there is that to consider. If you don't really worry about that, you got Plecos that you know are going to chow down if that food's there. Maybe you have a dedicated Pleco tank, like I have a couple tanks that are dedicated Plecos. Don't worry about this part. It's only if you're trying to make sure that those tabs stay down, that your other fish aren't going to eat it, and it's going to stay there. If for some reason they're super shy eaters, it is something to consider. However, compared to the positives, I would say this is drastically outweighed by the benefits of this food. So with that being said, that's really it. Overall, pair of thumbs up for the Xtreme guys. There's some other food that I am testing that I'm going to talk about relatively soon. The nice part about having been going back and forth with the guys at Xtreme in general is that they welcome all feedback, positive or negative. So far, with one exception, and that's coming up, I've had basically pure positive feedback. You know, the cons, of course, are the easy thing. It's a little expensive, so people will complain about that, but I understand because they've given me some kind of insights into their process, how they make their food, how they choose things. It's interesting to find out what ingredients actually cost them more. They don't tell me how much they cost them, but they'll tell me, like, this ingredient in particular costs us more than this ingredient, and you would think it would be like the other way around. So it's just kind of interesting to get those insights from a fish food manufacturer when they kind of are trying to explain where they try to ensure their quality is at its highest. So with that being said, I would love to hear your guys' comments down below. Have you tried some of the Xtreme foods since my last review? Maybe the krill flake, maybe the nano pellets. I think both of those are fantastic foods. I absolutely love them. Have you had the bottom sinking wafers before? I'd love to hear about those. Maybe you're a Pleco nerd or you're a Corridora nerd and you've tried this food out. Maybe you've had horrible results compared to mine. Let me know in the comments down below if you enjoy videos like this. Kind of a little informal, a little quick and down and dirty just based on my experience. Give it a little thumbs up if you're looking for massive scientific analysis and you can't stand the fact that it's just like, well, I observed this in my tank of 20 Plecos and that's not scientific at all. You can hit the thumbs down twice. I'll understand. For those of you who are new to this channel, this is your first time checking out one of my videos. If you enjoy content like this, I do a live stream every Tuesday, videos every Saturday. Consider subscribing. Maybe even tickle that little notification bell. Consider subscribing. Maybe even tickle that little notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of the community posts, polls, videos, live streams, everything. I review all sorts of products, especially fish tank lighting has become kind of one of my things lately. And by lately, I mean like the last 2 years. But in general, I review lots of stuff. I do all sorts of education. I love talking about plants and most especially rainbow fish. So if you're into that kind of stuff, definitely subscribe. Maybe you already are a subscriber. If you are, thank you so much. Love hearing from you guys. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube magic algorithm stuff. Maybe even share this if you got somebody who's on the fence about figuring out their next food for their own Plecos or Corridoras. Give this little video a share. maybe it'll give him a good idea. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.